Welcome back to Book Break. I've got some properly incredible book recommendations for you today because I'm going to be looking at books that were shortlisted for the Booker Prize. And the reason I'm doing this is because we are so excited that one of our books, Western Lane by Chetna Maru, is shortlisted for this year's Booker Prize, which is so exciting and so well deserved. And this book is a book that honestly I would recommend to such a huge range of people, and that is what inspired the theme of this week's video, which is going to be Booker shortlisted books that aren't too hard to read. Because if you're anything like me, I can sometimes feel a little bit nervous of books that I know were shortlisted for this prize because it's such an honour, it's such a prestigious prize. And really what Booker shortlisted books all have in common is that they are all incredible works of literature. But other than that, it's a really big range of books that make it onto the shortlist, and they're not all what you might have in mind when you think of the Booker. So yes, there are Booker shortlisted books that are incredibly experimental and really challenging to read, and those books are fantastic, but they're also not for everyone. Whereas other times you get books that are so beautifully written and so thought-provoking in their themes that they are more than worthy of this great honour of this prize without having to stray too far from the more traditional forms of a novel. So if you find yourself a little nervous of the very, very experimental end of the Booker Prize, there are plenty of books that you might find more accessible, but that are still really high quality works of literature. And I think that's such an incredible skill in itself when a book is able to be really accessible to the reader, really readable, but to do so much. That is a very well crafted book. And Western Lane is one of those books. And this book is also only 161 pages, and it does so much in such a short space. Chetna Maru is really an incredible writer. So we are very, very proud that Western Lane is on this year's Booker shortlist, and we have everything crossed for the prize ceremony this year. Western Lane is a really moving book. It's a coming-of-age story about a girl in the wake of her mother's death, growing up with her sisters and being raised by their father, and it's about the way that she channels her grief into the game squash. Her father is her coach, and that is this really kind of important bonding time between them, and she really throws everything into practicing squash. It's such a beautiful portrayal of grief and of family and sisterhood. And I'm so excited to see how this one does in the Booker Prize. So if you do find yourself a little nervous of Booker nominated books, which there is absolutely no shame in, then I really think this is a great recommendation for you. This beautiful, short, sweet book. I mean, literally beautiful as well. Look at the colours, it's just stunning. And I've also got a list here, but a pile here of other books that were shortlisted for the Booker Prize or even won the Booker Prize without straying too far into really experimental territory, and books that I think a lot of readers will find very readable, but also incredible. I'm going to work chronologically backwards. So we know that this year in 2023, Western Lane is my main book recommendation for you. Going back to 2022, Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan made it onto the Booker shortlist. Again, really lovely, short, sweet book. This one is actually just 110 pages. And again, it really does so much with such a short page span. This is a book set in Ireland in 1985, and it's about an Irish man who stumbles across something terrible, something that the community where he lives was only vaguely aware of going on in the heart of their community, and he has to make a decision about what to do about it. I don't want to spoil anything because when I was reading this book I had no idea where it was going when the book started, and that was a really great reading experience. So I want you to be able to have the same experience, but I will just say that this is based on real history. It's based on real things that we know did happen in this period of time in Ireland and in other places around the world, and it's a book that will make you feel so angry that these things really happened, but it's actually a really beautiful, lovely book about human kindness and charity, and it made me cry in just 110 pages. The year before that, in 2021, I'm breaking my streak of short books. Great Circle is a massive book, but this was on the Booker shortlist, and it is such a brilliant adventure story. Again, it is really readable, it is really page-turning. I forgot how big it was, I just raced through this one. So this is the story of a female pilot That's one timeline, is this woman who set off to fly around the world. That's the Great Circle. And then in the present day, we meet the young Hollywood starlet, the kind of Kristen Stewart type figure, who is playing her in the movie adaptation. And the movie adaptation is being adapted from a novel that was written about her. So you kind of get all of these different retellings of her story. So it's very clever, but it's not done in a complicated way. I found it really easy to follow what was going on, and I loved the themes of storytelling about our own lives, other people's lives, and which versions of ourselves will get passed on. It's a really sweeping book, such a beautiful story, and it's got love stories in it, and it's got adventure and excitement in it, and it's got fame and Hollywood in it, so much going on inside these pages. It is a cracking read. Back in 2020, another of our books won the Booker Prize, which was so exciting. That was Shaggy Bane by Douglas Stewart. This is a beautiful and very, very sad book. So although I have said in the video title that these are books that are not too hard to read, so this is hard to read in a different kind of way, in that it is very emotional. It's a real tearjerker. It's a beautiful story about a young boy called Shaggy growing up in Glasgow, living with his mother, who is an alcoholic and who he loves so much that the book really reads like a love letter to his mother, even though she fails him and lets him down over and over again. And this poor little boy growing up in this home where he is not being given the love and support that he needs and deserves. He has older siblings who are struggling in their own ways as well. But Agnes, his mother, is the sort of central character of this book, and she's such a well-written character, and you care for her so much, even when you're frustrated by her so much, and just sort of desperate for her, wanting her to be able to get better in the way that she wants for herself so much. But life is just so against her. It's a very, very sad book, but it's a really beautifully written story. Douglas Stewart is a great writer, great person. He's coming to the office a lot. I always love listening to him talk about his writing. And yeah, Shaggy Bane, if you're feeling brave enough, you should definitely read this book. In 2019, you may remember there was a lot of controversy because two books won the Booker Prize, which had not been done before and was met with quite a lot of backlash. But both books that won the Booker Prize in 2019, I think, fit this theme. They're very, very different. So I have here one of the winners, Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo, which was just such a brilliant book. So this weaves together different stories, different characters. We meet 12 different main characters, mostly women, mostly Black British women. And it's almost like reading 12 different short stories, but they all connect in different ways. So you can kind of draw a map of how all of the different characters know each other or are related to each other. And this book, if you opened it at first glance, you might think that it does look like a more experimental Booker-winning book, but it's actually so readable. So Bernardine Evaristo doesn't really use punctuation in this book, which I was nervous about because I'm not a super experimental reader. But instantly I was sucked in and found that it just made me read this book so fast. I was so invested. It actually really helped the flow of me reading this book, and I instantly felt like I knew each of the characters so well. This was a brilliant book, honestly, one of my favourites. The other book to win the Booker Prize that year was The Testaments by Margaret Atwood, which was a sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, her most famous novel. And this was set 15 years after the events in The Handmaid's Tale, and it's sort of an adventure escape story. So again, very, very readable. That was Margaret Atwood's second time winning the Booker Prize for two very different books. The Blind Assassin was her first time back in, I believe, 2000, and then in 2019 she won it again for The Testaments. So what an achievement, to win the Booker Prize twice. In 2015, another of our books, A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, made it onto the Booker Prize shortlist. And this definitely falls into the same kind of category as Shaggy Bane, that it is not hard to read in terms of the form of the novel, but it is very, very hard to read in terms of the subject matter. But it is one of the most beautiful books I think ever written. I absolutely love this book. I have read it twice, which many people question my sanity for deciding to do that because it is a very heavy book. But it's a book about love and about hope, and also about trauma and about abuse, and about a main character who has gone through unimaginable levels of trauma in his life and finds himself almost completely incapable of overcoming that trauma. And so we see hope kind of rise and fall over and over again throughout the novel. Everything is brought to extremes. It is really about the absolute limits of human endurance, but then within that it's about the power of love and friendship. And there are so many amazing characters and relationships in this book. The main character is part of a group of 4 best friends, and we follow all of them as they grow up and go through their own hardships in life. He also has an adoptive father figure who is just one of the most divine characters in any book. This book is not for the faint-hearted. There is a lot of very, very difficult subject matter in this book. So I would advise you to be careful going into it, but it is one of my favourite books ever. And if you are prepared to read a book that is more than 700 pages long and that contains such difficult subject matter, you will find it is an incredibly readable book. Another Pam Macmillan book that was shortlisted in 2010 is Room by Emma Donoghue, which is such a page turner. Emma Donoghue writes such a huge range of genres. Every single time you pick up an Emma Donoghue book, you will have a new experience. She's such a versatile writer, and Room is her thriller, it is her page turner. It is the story of a woman who, for reasons that become clear as the novel goes on, is living in a room with her young child who she is raising there and who has never seen the outside world at all. The room they live in is 11 feet by 11 feet, and so the book is so claustrophobic and so terrifying when you realise what's going on. I could not put this book down. It's been adapted into a truly brilliant film with Brie Larson playing the main mother character, and she's fantastic in it. So this book is probably the most readable, the most accessible to the widest range of audience of any of these, but it's so beautifully written that it really makes sense. It really deserves its spot on the Booker shortlist, because this book is such a great work of literature, and it is a book that really makes you think. It's got such interesting and challenging, thought-provoking themes in it when you realise what is going on and what our main character is supposed to do next and how she is supposed to feel about what is happening. It's a book that you will think about for a long, long time. The Night Watch by Sarah Waters, which was shortlisted in 2006, is experimental in that it is told backwards. It's divided into 3 sections, and each one takes place further back in time than the one before it, but it is also a really plot-heavy, page-turning historical fiction novel that you will not have any trouble keeping up with what is going on. What this plot device means, though, is that instead of going forward to find out what happens to each character, you're going back to find out what made each character into the person they are. It goes backwards to the 1940s, so it is a World War II novel, it is a London novel, it is a queer novel. There's a lot to love in here. And finally, let's finish up with one more of our books. The Line of Beauty by Alan Hollinghurst won the Booker Prize back in 2004. This is another book set in London, but this time in the 1980s. It's by a young man called Nick, 20-year-old, who moves in as a lodger with this very wealthy couple. The husband is a Conservative MP. They have 2 adult children who Nick is really fascinated by, and we follow him as he gets sucked into this high society life. It's very different from his own background, and as he starts to explore the gay scene in London in the 1980s. So there's a lot about the pursuit of pleasure and of beauty. So a lot of sex and drugs. So as you can see, Western Lane follows in the footsteps of greats. It's the latest in the long line of books that are really, really brilliant books, perhaps deceptively simple books that you will find really readable and really accessible, but that will take you on such a journey, and by the end you realise that you have read a masterpiece. So we are really, really rooting for it. I will keep you updated. Do let me know in the comments below which Booker books you have read and loved, and I will link here to a video I made on A to Z of book prizes, so you can find out a bit more about how they all work. So do click through and have a watch of that one, and I'll see you next time.